Namaste, my name is Bharati Pathak. I am a DGM Global Steering Committee co-chair. So I am going to welcome to all of you. This is the official launch of the 2021 DGM Annual Report. This is a very exciting moment as all 12 DGM countries have received the Forest Investment Program subcommittee approval. 3 DGM countries have closed out. The majority of the countries are in implementation and other are just beginning. There are many key results on the ground in DGM communities and so many more to come with the recent launch of DGM Guatemala and more to come. The DGM governance is one of the reason it stands out from other forest management effort. It was conceived and designed by IPLC to enhance their role in protecting the forest they depend on, and since its inception continues to be led by members of the communities it seeks to benefit. The DGM unique structure includes both National Steering Committee and Global Steering Committee, which are the decision-making bodies for the DGM. These committees are selected by and comprised primarily of indigenous people and local communities members, with observer of the National Executive Agency, World Bank, national government and civil society to continue the partnership model of the Forest Investment Program. As you will see in the 2021 annual report, the GSC is made of the 16 IPLC representatives and the 12 established the NSCs, including GSC, have 2031 community representatives making decision on their respective country project and global project. 44% of GSC are women and 24% of all NSC members are women. Talking about the Nepal, regarding my experience, since 4 years we are working country level steering committee handling in Nepal. Especially we are in together and local community and indigenous people, a very inclusive steering committee in Nepal. Especially we are raising the voice for the local community and indigenous people all over the natural resource rights. So this is the very good opportunity for the local community and indigenous people, and playing to the very good role and the DGM country national steering committee. So that is the good practice, and that is the very good initiative. So playing to the very good role in globally, and from the national level steering committee and representation from the Nepal. So now I am coordinating, so I am leading in co-chair in the global steering committee. There is also very important role we are playing there, especially very inclusive, very inclusion process in the global steering committee also. So we are learning to the different country, local community and indigenous people activity and the role and the other stakeholder also in there. So this is the very good experience and the new experience in the country level and the global level. The DGM has supported and strengthened over the 600 community initiative in DGM country by providing the direct access to climate finance to them, scaling up their effort and facilitating the knowledge exchange between IPLC around the world by improving the community livelihood, supporting and land tenure and native community recognition, increasing the community participation in the forest landscape management, supporting climate change mitigation and adaptation, and encouraging to participate of the women, youth, and the other marginalized group. I'm talking about the Brazil. In responsive to COVID-19 pandemic, DGM Brazil created a new project sub-component called the immediate response window to support 2,800 families of sub-project implementation and stakeholder through the window, 28 families. I'm moving forward. The Mexico approved the 50 social inclusion window sub-grant. 87% are women lead. Regarding first DGM country project to close out in June 2021, facilitate the official recognition of the 245 indigenous communities. Over the 10,260 families benefited from the project action. More than 2,50,000 hectare of land title and over the 6,42,000 hectare of sustainable forest management. At the adoption and the Senate approval of the law of the promotion and the protection of indigenous practice, people was achieved through the capacity building for the collective of parliamentarians in defense of the rights of the indigenous people. Thank you so much. I would like to very welcome to all of you. Thank you so much.
The launch event of the 2021 report from Dgm and Global. I know that there is an important participation that are here in this event. The project of the Dgm, it's a very transcendent challenge. We need to strengthen the local capabilities of indigenous peoples and local communities. People that inhabit the natural areas in the world. This strategy, through the financing of the economic, social, and environmental activities, we need capital investment compatible with the environment. We need to strengthen the economic capabilities and also the organization capabilities. My visit to the Dgm Guatemala, that the World Bank as a development agency, it has proposed different actions that need to be carried away to face climate change, but this needs to be hand in hand with the fight against poverty. The World Bank has a worldview where the communities have all this conservation culture that the indigenous communities and that inhabit these regions, well, they are the responsible ones to have large extensions of rainforests that produce oxygen, but that also strengthen the economy of the communities of the people who live there. This needs to be related with the local communities. They say that they are the only stakeholder to the organized management of resources in the world. They inhabit these territories and they're responsible for these resources. We depend on rules that allow us to incorporate them to development without losing their identity. The bank, through the Dgm, it's proposing a pilot program where we need to observe is the rules that we are applying are the appropriate ones, or maybe we need to modify them to make them more efficient and more cost-effective. To face the challenges that the world is presenting, I think that the development of local communities needs to be understood with the balance of conservation and strengthening economic initiatives of these groups. We always think on the countries, but we don't think about the region of Indonesia or the Amazon region or the Gran Petén region in Mexico that ends up in Central America. We don't understand that we do not depend on territorial borders. These changes need to come from the communities. We need to elevate the organizational elements. We need to overcome bureaucracy with regulations that are based on the cultural and political circumstances of the communities. This needs to strengthen the initiatives from these communities, from these indigenous groups and local communities. I say this as a message. We have proposed several initiatives, one as a conservation, with conservation characteristics, but always looking for the balance from the elements. So globally, we have a group in the executing agency that is under the responsibility of Conservation International in Washington. They have a great team that has understood the proposals, the initiatives, the discussions of these groups. This has been a valid I think we may find a balance and find a future scheme that strengthens the capabilities of the communities, and they need to be the ones who steer their own way, and they need to manage their resources that help their development. Thank you very much. I wish all the success for this meeting, and I hope it's useful for everybody. Thank you for participating, and thank you for your patience. Thank you, Manuel. There's no audio, Chloe. Could we move on?
Bueno, creo que tenemos alguna dificultad con el video que queríamos proyectar.
We were having some technical issues with the video that we wanted to present. Manuel is the global president of the executive committee of DGM. Unfortunately, we cannot play the Bharatis video, which is the other co-chair from Nepal. I think we have the intervention of Byron, and Byron is going to facilitate the session. Thank you very much, Byron. Thank you, Johnson. Thank you, Manuel, for these opening remarks, for this event that is so important for the indigenous communities. This is within the DGM mechanism for indigenous peoples and local communities. So, if the elders allow me, we're going to start with our activity. Today, the Mayan calendar is marking the energy and the wisdom. This is the day of knowledge and intelligence, and also the day of science. There's also the connection with the cosmic mind and the human mind. The elders used to gather under the protection of the Noh sign so they can transform knowledge and experience into wisdom and form a science. So we today, as part of the DGM for indigenous peoples and local communities, we meet here to be able to share and exchange, but especially to show all the progress that we've done in the different projects. So, besides what Manuel already said about this mechanism, well, this DGM mechanism, it's a unique mechanism designed by indigenous peoples and local communities. This was established by the climate investment funds. This, since 2010, this was created to strengthen the role of indigenous communities in forest protection. The DGM includes 12 national projects. Each one of them is adapted to the specific national context, and we have a global project of knowledge exchange to facilitate coordination and to expand the benefits of the mechanisms that it's aimed to the representatives of communities that depend on forest. And what makes it unique? There may be a lot of programs pushing different initiatives around climate, but the DGM is unique one because of the governance led by the communities. Each project is led by each of the representatives of each country, and they have been elected democratically to lead the different processes. Other relevant aspect of the DGM mechanism is decentralization, since each project is designed according to the priorities of indigenous peoples and local communities of each country, creating a higher efficiency compared with other programs with a similar scale, notwithstanding the National Forest Plan. Other aspect that I want to highlight from the DGM is the capacity building. From this participatory space, the community members contribute to important results of forest management. So these are the features of the DGM, and as I said, we've met on this space to be able to exchange experiences, to be able to know and to hear from every stakeholder involved in the different territories of the countries. So, if this mechanism, if the tool to fight climate change is us as human beings, then we need to be able to hear the voices of each stakeholder that is developing the activities against climate change in each territory. So now I'm honored to present the representative from Brazil, Mr. Mike Arruda. He is a member of the National Executing Committee of the DGM. He is a member of a traditional community, so I remind you that we have 5 minutes to exchange our experiences, and maybe we can have a couple of minutes for any question from the participants. So welcome everyone to this such a relevant space, and let's know more about the experiences of each territory. So, Mr. Mike, from your experience, what's the main conclusion that you arrive to regarding your community that it's applying to the DGM, and what are the impacts on conservation, biodiversity, and climate change?
Thank you very much. I would like to thank you for the invitation for this meeting, and the coordinator of DGM Brazil. She might be hearing us, and she might also be participating in this event. It is such an honor to be here. However, the general focus of DGM is our validation of the network. And then as we have a sustainable projects, conservation, and also acknowledgement, because it's extremely important for all the traditional communities towards conservation. In Brazil, all the DGM projects, we had 3 main focuses. The first one is a territory and surveillance management. The second is for the restoration of conservation areas. And the third focus is to generate income and revenue. So we had several approved processes in this Cerrado. And we have also the management. It's the very first time that communities, the rural communities, are able to work with that. And we are taking into account the Amazon. So today, as the total, we've had 13 projects that were approved, focusing on construction, building, partnerships with different communities and the bioma, the rural bioma. So then we would be able to work in common towards conservation of our territories and the forests. So talking about rural areas in Brazil, especially in Brazil, and income, it's something very important, because we have extended areas with a system of biomas and communities. Even though we have a bioma, we have differences. But I'd like also to emphasize something about it, which is essentially for us to act upon this network, and DGM has provided us this opportunity. So then here in Brazil, we are able to operate in different regions, in different territories, considering the sustainable and the aggregation of value, the generation of revenue income, and also the sustainable management of the territories with different chains. Today, I'm going to emphasize the Baru area. We have this for the international markets, and Babaçu, we have different projects that were approved and supported, and we have the support from DGM. So we have a consortium also, and the contribution of the DGM and the contribution of all the supported projects in different regions, we were able to demonstrate with all of that it is viable for us to have the conservation and also have the sustainable use of the biodiversity, and also the collective use of all of that. So I would like to mention these words. We've got a lot of things to cover about it, and the DTM Brazil, our committee, is very active upon this process as a whole, and with different interventions. It acts very directly with corrective management, and I would like to thank for this project, and we are going to move through the second phase of the project. The project has been approved for the second phase, and in the upcoming weeks, we are going to be able to discuss about new ideas, new insights of the program in the level of Brazil. We will be focusing on rural areas and people, the local communities, and the lifestyle of local communities, and also considering the conservation of our territories. So thank you very much, Chloe. Thank you for the team. And we have here some products, the pictures of some products, and it's essential to have partnerships with institutes and companies, so then we will be able to think in a different way about commercialization, production. We have here in Brazil specific organizations for it, second level organizations. And thank you very much once again for this opportunity, and I will be at your disposal if you have questions and answers. Thank you very much for all of you, and I would like to thank all my peers. And we know that we are not able to be in person due to the pandemic. And that's it. Thank you very much for all your attention.
Muchas gracias, mi estimado Mike.
Thank you very much, dear Mike. Thank you for sharing thank you for sharing what's the mechanism it's doing in Brazil. There are several relevant aspects, such as a control or surveillance of territory, also restoration, and especially this income generation and all the community partnerships. There's going to be some time for a Q&A, so you can write down your questions so we can ask them at the end. So having said that, there's an interesting element
y es prácticamente cómo se reducen las brechas de desigualdad.
we need to see how to shorten the inequality gaps so we can all have a full participation. And for this, the next topic that we're gonna do is gender equality and inclusion. Sherdu is the representative of Indonesia. She's from the Osin community, and she's been an essential part of these activities developed in her country. She's a representative of indigenous women. He has documented and worked on indigenous people's cases. So it's an honor to be able to introduce her and leave the floor to her. So She can comment about her experience, about the achievements of her country. What are the activities of your community and what's their impact on climate change? Please go ahead.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon to all of you in USA. And here in Indonesia, already night. Okay, I'm Asurti Handayani. I'm from the Indonesia. I'm NSG members. I'm work for indigenous peoples as an attorney or as a lawyer for indigenous peoples. Okay, I will present about how indigenous women's and gender equality based on our projects in Indonesia. We are where we are now. For the past 2 years, DGM's in Indonesia activities has been slowing down due to COVID-19 pandemic. Is kind of like the country all of you. Despite the limitations, we are able to achieve the following support, like 63 sub-projects across Indonesians, involving 200 communities. And then more than 16,000 people were exposed to the program. 4,600 of them were female, and then more than 8,000 people benefited materially from livelihood program activities. It's about 2,300 of them were female. It's like the community members. 46 IPLC have submitted evidence for the tenure recognitions to the Indonesian government, and then it have a good achievement. And then how the gender equality and social inclusion mainstreaming who DGM in Indonesia are doing for the implementer. From the very beginning, DGM Indonesia have a 30% requirement of female involvement in the project. It's kind of like including the sub-projects. To date, DGM Indonesia in SG members are equally divided between male and female. 4 female and 5 male, one of them is I'm. And the gender inclusions guideline have been shared at the earliest of the sub-projects commencement with the hope for its application within the activities. After the sharing, some of sub-projects undergoing improvement towards gender and inclusions application. However, some are indifferent, mostly because of the cultural barrier. It is one of problem in Indonesia, but maybe in all of the DGM members also around of the country. Starting this year, DGM Indonesia also involved differently able communities. It's like it is in its activities. It's like what the activity female involved in this DGM projects, like they doing and joining the socializing of the DGM Indonesia, like in Central Java, also in Papua. Papua is like in east of Indonesia, and also around of the archipelago in Indonesia who has our implementer. But we also facing like the cultural barrier. That's like our bottleneck in Indonesia, how to solve the gender inclusions doing well in Indonesia. In some areas where women voices are recognized, they are confident to express their opinions in the public, and that's showing at the sometimes like where we're doing like workshop or doing for the audience with the governments. There's like it's like okay, they have the what kind of self-confidence to speak up. and have the self-confidence to joining as a decision making when the project were doing in their communities. And also technically, the woman has the increased knowledge and technical capacity of the female community members were reported. They joining the mapping activity to the community, because in our traditional knowledge, women as the knowledge keepers for the land, for their ancestor land. And the females are heavily involved in livelihood activities too. It was reported in some areas that females have an increased income from the activities, like making some cooking from the nature, like social forestry. And then in our efforts to implement gender and inclusions, we also involve differently abled communities within our networks and activities starting this year. And that's really good achievement for this project. Like we invite the deaf and blind barista to be part of the Samdana participation in the 2022 Pesona Festival hosted by the Indonesian Ministry of Environment and Forestry. And that's like one of progress in this project. DGM is really helpful to encourage the communities, but especially for the women, for the youth, and also for the differently able communities. That's one of our learning and one of our experience from this project. Maybe that's one of the experience from Indonesia, who I'm sharing to all of you. Thank you so much, and good night from Indonesia, and good afternoon to all of you.
Thank you, Surti, for sharing your experience from Indonesia, of Indonesia's DGM. It was really interesting in order to have an influence in other organizations in the country. One very interesting element is how can we gain more spaces to encourage participation of women in the different activities. As Surti was saying, they are the guardians of knowledge and the forest. Thank you for sharing your experience, such an important experience and inspiring for other colleagues. And it's very important to seek equality of rights for everyone. As a reminder, please, let's stick to the time so we can listen to every intervention and have a time to have a Q&A session. Now for the next presentation, we have invited Mr. Winston Adams. He's the representative from Ghana. He's going to tell us about education and knowledge transfer. Since the appropriate use of science is not only about conquering nature, we need to live with the nature. So these are the principles for us, indigenous peoples and local communities. So welcome, Mr. Winston, and Regarding education and knowledge transfer, what are your main conclusions or your takeaways of this project? And especially, what is the impact in biodiversity conservation and climate change? Go ahead.
Thank you very much. So the DGM project in Ghana was conceptualized based on the fact that community people and local communities were facing specific climate change vulnerabilities. And this was more of a vicious cycle where unsustainable land use practices, charcoal burning, bush burning, agricultural practices / burn in such a way that they were leading changes in microclimatic conditions. So aside the general changes in the global climate, there were specific contexts also within the landscapes which community people were driving, and they were beginning to feel these impacts. The most important part of the knowledge that we saw was that climate change knowledge is not new. The fact that climatic parameters are changing, rainfall duration has reduced and temperature has become high was not new to these community people. They know because their livelihoods depend very much on rainfall. And so if the rainfall wasn't coming, it's something they have known and observed from very long time. What they didn't know, which we did as a project, was the connection between their own land use practices and the kind of experiences they were observing. That connection wasn't there. They attributed the changes to all sorts of things. So as a project, the direction we went was to break that vicious cycle that was making community people depend heavily on forests because the agricultural produce are not coming as they were getting before, and livelihoods was going down and poverty was increasing. So the use of forests for charcoal, the use of forests for illegal timber operations, and the use of forest land for additional farming was one that was very damaging to the environment. And this knowledge gave us an opportunity to pursue a set of capacity building and knowledge transfer interventions, which were quite innovative because you have community people spread across different landscapes who have to be engaged in a very dynamic manner, not in a classroom setting, so that they can really pick the practicalities of their knowledge gap in terms of their land use practices connection to their environmental challenges. So we deployed several approaches. We use radio, we use community, what we call community information center. Most communities normally have public address systems in the communities they use for announcements. And we do this very early in the morning before they go to farms. We also use a very popular musician, Ochami Kwame, and we used him because he has a strong followership. He composed DGM specific music based on his observations of the climate change and vulnerability context of the community. And that drew a lot of the community people to the knowledge sharing platform. Now, once we deployed all these approaches and we realized that the knowledge was now very much well-grounded, even before we started with our interventions on sustainable land use practices and the real on-farm engagement, community people were already by themselves, based on the knowledge they gained and the awareness they have gotten, have started sustainable land use practices and good agricultural practices without DGM intervention. So the forest investment program, for instance, started recording high demand for tree seedlings for incorporation into agroforestry systems in the farms of farmers. An observation which wasn't so before DGM started, the FIP project started before DGM project took off. So that demand now started telling us that the knowledge gap is already being filled. A lot of the community people were also reporting that on their own, they were changing their own land use practices. Now, that was an exciting thing because we have managed to break the knowledge gap. We've managed to open up an understanding within the context of climate change, which were formerly not appreciated. That is how community people associate themselves with the occurrence of the vulnerabilities they face. And it is not that there's any God that is punishing them because of sins, or there is some taboo that somebody has done, but it's very much linked to their own land use practices. That was the good entry point. And based on that, it opened the way for a bottom-up approach in responding to these climate change vulnerabilities. Remember, most of the climate change interventions we have seen across have mostly been top-down, where experts and climate change practitioners design programs and now implement in the communities. This time around, the community people themselves, through our capacity building, saw what they are doing and how it is contributing to the experiences. And they designed, with our support, their own interventions they wanted to use to respond to their climate change vulnerabilities. And that was another key important message we picked across, and the lesson we picked across the implementation of the Ghana DGM, that if you manage to build knowledge so strongly, you don't only change behavior, but you capacitate community people to proactively engage in the co-creation of response interventions, and they have ownership for it. So once we did that, we realized that the community people were creating responses to their climate vulnerabilities around agricultural resilience. So in the picture you are seeing, the demand for tree seedlings went up, and the interest to incorporate trees into agricultural systems was basically based on understanding that shade is important, and then the provision of fruits are also critical to income diversification. So building resilience is critical. Now, based on the understanding also, they realized that it is very important to provide support for tree seedlings, even at the driest times of the year. And that is also another critical time. So in the picture, you see a dispenser bottle, which is normally used by offices to dispense water. Once the water is finished, most of these bottles go waste. Community people themselves started doing drip irrigation with this more or less a plastic waste material. And this was very critical in providing resilience for these tree seedlings at the dry season for them to survive, because most seedlings die at the dry season because there's no rainfall. But the most important part is also the engagement in income diversification, when community people begin to realize that they cannot continually depend on the forest when their food crops are not growing anymore because rainfall are not coming. They need to create forest enterprises and diversify their income portfolios. That is the power of knowledge. And by themselves, CBOs, community-based organizations, and then individuals.
Un minuto para poder concluir, mi estimado.
Only 1 minute.
Started creating these opportunities for themselves. So essentially, the major lessons we have learned in the DGM project is that when you're able to improve knowledge, you're able to get community buy-in, you're able to empower them to pursue interventions that can be sustained and respond to their own climate resilience. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this relevant contribution. And there's nothing as knowledge management. This can change in behavior. That's an insight that everyone should take. And communication is an essential pillar in order to generate this knowledge transfer from generation to generation. also involving artists. They play a leading role in communication, and this allows us to see things from a different perspective. Thank you, dear Winston, for sharing this knowledge. Now, moving on with this knowledge exchange space, in order to know the experience from all the regions. Now we have a message that says a better world is possible with a green mindset. So from DGM Mexico, I want to introduce Laura Jimenez. She's from the Santiago indigenous community, from the Santiago de Oaxaca community. He is the focal point from the Osachi project in the DGM Mexico. She was also a fellow in the first stage in 2021. So I leave the floor to her so she can share their experience. So welcome, Laura Jimenez. From your experience, what are the main conclusions that you're applying to the DGM Mexico? But what was the impact on conservation and biodiversity? Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. So can I participate in the annual report launch? And I've been participating in a project of Sierra Juárez, and I was also a fellow in the previous stage. From the community-led solutions point of view, and especially sustainable forestry, we can say that being communities that make their own decisions is helpful. Through DGM, we have established 86 projects here in Mexico. 38 of them have to do with financial inclusion, and 48 are about social inclusion. The social inclusion, we have several groups, and they carry out a productive activity for their families or their groups. And these uses the resources sustainably, especially the forest resources. And when the groups get organized, well, they can access the funds and they can contribute to conservation, and they have a global impact on climate change mitigation. Communities own their resources, they know their forests, and that enables them to make the best decision. What's best for conservation? What productive activities can be carried out with minimum impacts? There are different projects in financial inclusion. We have some transformational projects so we can end up with marketable products. We have set up community companies to manage these resources. We've had the commitment from the communities. It's not about extracting resources. We need to think, how can I give back to the forest? This could be through reforestation or projects or sustainable projects. And we need to look after what we have. We also have monitoring practices. We have greenhouse plants, and we know that the forest belongs to everyone, so there's a social commitment. The DGM projects, well, 44 involve women, and we have over 3,000 people working on this. We have over 500 people employed. We also have local promoters that advise the different groups, and especially the social inclusion projects, because these are people that get involved into projects. They have the traditional knowledge for resource management, but they need to see how to manage the financial resources. This is a joint effort for forest conservation and forest generation. It's not only taking advantage of the forest, but also giving something back and contributing to mitigate a global change by keeping our forests healthy. And ultimately, the ones who make the decisions are the communities. The pandemic has affected us because we cannot have the regular assemblies, but we have looked for mechanisms to enable decision making. And this way we can continue with these projects. Once we don't have the funding, we can generate the same resources. But also we can generate alliances or partnerships. This enables us to work with donors, so all the commitments are kept through time. The communities, 75% of this is reinvested to the forest. We have biodiversity monitoring activities, conservation activities. So there's a commitment from the communities, and I'd like to recognize that. Communities guard this for future generation, thinking about an economic development, but also a sustainable forest and development. Thank you very much, Laura, for these contributions. This is a really interesting experience. We know about this in Guatemala because we are starting this mechanism in our country. So, besides conservation, we need to seek for sustainabilities in each strategic pillar, and we need to organize these companies that provide jobs and funding for each of the families to reduce pressure in each of the forests. So thank you, Laura, for your intervention. And with this, we move on to another country. We go to the Congo Democratic Republic. We have Mr. Bill Mochire. He's the lead of the project in Congo. He's the leader for the Northern Kivu Community Project. So It's a pleasure to salute you from Guatemala, and we want to hear about the lessons learned on the project implemented in Congo. So he's going to tell us about law and land policy. So what are the main conclusions for this community project? And especially, what's the impact on conservation, on biodiversity conservation, and in the climate change mitigation? Go ahead, Deal. Welcome.
Thank you, moderators, for accompanying me. I am very, very happy to be part of the panelists of this organization. My name is Dgm Mwenge, and I work for Ideshiri Klabamuti in the quality of director. Now I work in this for this organization, which is a very important role for the mobilization, and it takes me all throughout the provinces. Now, for me, I want to talk about what is it that we have gained here before we can go into what we have learned. I would like to thank, first of all, the project for the innovation at the Democratic Republic of Congo, because it is thanks to this program that we have, and via the management of my project, that via this program, we realize that there is a considerable impact, in particular to the education of women via the alphabetization of women, and also related to the access and protection of forests and protection of natural resources via the identification of the different impacts that affect them, and also the establishment of initiatives, and also for concession of the use of the forest for each of the communities. So this year has been very exciting year for us. And also via our partnership, we have been able to, we have our partnership that we have received 40,000 hectares of land, which are now used via our lifestyle and responsibility, but also, sorry, but also the recognition of the proprietorship of this land, which is something that has showed our enormous pride we have of this land that belongs to us, and that also takes into account the rights of Aboriginal people, and also the land that we protect, where there's lots of people that who may wish to have ill will out towards this land. Now, the rights of Aboriginal people is something that we realize that is part of the protection of this via this and the framework of this project. So via this project, we also created a mechanism to have them be more autonomous, and also to create activities that generate revenue, economic revenue for them. Now, all these activities are linked together, of course, but innovation via collaboration with different people, and also assuring the participation of women for the promotion and of the protection of the rights of Aboriginal people is something that helped us greatly, of course, but also the innovation of reforestation, different activities. And if we take into account the activities you have made, we have not only contributed to the reforestation, but also the plantation of different fruit-bearing trees, which have helped us to have more shade via these activities. Something also helped us bring this project to light was the fact that we understood that everything must have a foundation of knowledge, and it is a guarantee that we will have a protection for the forest, and that will help us also to have here in Congo a protection of all the different protection of Aboriginal people and indigenous people. Now, conclusions that we have learned is that we had a great amount of women who didn't know how to read or write. Women who, and these women were the ones who later developed all these activities that characterized the region. But they could not talk about solidarity and unity. But now they can alone increase the value of our activities enormously, and to go even beyond what we ask of them, and to escape poverty. Now, this is one of the first activities that we had. This is one of the first activities we had for the Aboriginal people that just came out of their villages, and the message was this: just push forward, push forward. And we told them to, we will give you what you need, we will find what you need, we will let you know how we can help you, because what we want is that this project reaches a conclusion. So this, now, lessons learned is that if we respect one another, and if we and we have done this via the pilot committee, so we thank you. I thank you very much to everyone who has helped us this pass, and I hope that this project continues in the future, so that we can ensure the values of all that we have gained in this project. So that's it. That's all I wanted to share. Thank you for all participants, and thank you.
Muchas gracias, Diel.
Thank you very much, Diel. These elements are an essential part to seek for this autonomy. A key issue is land ownership, because a lot of activities depend on it. So if we have that land ownership, we have that recognition, then automatically we became autonomous to carry out several activities to reduce poverty in each of our communities. It's interesting to see how these mechanisms was essential to provide access to education, to have that solidarity, and increase the participation of women in each of the educational spaces and decision-making spaces. So we need to push forward, as Diel said, so we can reduce these inequality gaps. Now, I would like to thank each of the panelists that have shared from their perspective and from their communities, their points of view. They have shared
desarrollo de este mecanismo tan importante, porque, como lo decía al principio, es un mecanismo, es un vehículo que prácticamente
Le mécanisme est un véhicule qui nous aidera à la gouvernance.
una gobernanza real que prácticamente
led from the communities, and these
esas diferencias de éxito. También esa descentralización.
we also need to work on decentralization, as Jill was saying.
Pero sobre todo ese desarrollo de capacidades, cómo las fortalecemos para poder avanzar.
To strengthen and the capabilities. So now we move on to the Q&A. Please, Johnson, Chloe, could you let me know if we have any questions so we can invite our panelists to answer them? Yes, thank you, Byron. We've seen two questions that have been answered internally.
Ponerte las preguntas aquí para que respondiera también. Es una pregunta que es
read the questions. This is a question for Ghana. It says, what's the plan for the beneficiaries can access the planted trees? They're talking about the tree rights. Winston answered internally. And the second question is, what's the sustainability plan for the Dgm Ghana? These are the two questions that I have. I don't know if Chloe or Lidiane have any questions that you have seen. Okay, thank you, Johnson.
Para nuestro compañero de la República de Ghana, entonces si puede prender el micrófono y poder responder a estas interrogantes que si bien se han hecho de forma individual.
Have been answered internally. We would like to share your answers with everybody.
Okay, thank you very much. So the DGM project was being implemented by Solidaridad. So even though the DGM project has ended, Solidaridad is an existing NGO. We've been contributing
muitas outras contribuições.
Registration form that would bring finality to all the issues about retainer. But in absence of that, there are still some challenges with the processes to get that done. What we have done to minimize the contestation between planted and natural occurring trees is to give specific on-farm interventions to the farmers so that they plant their trees in rows and not randomly, because no naturally occurring tree occurs in a row. We have also given a lot of advocacy and capacity building training about the planter's right, which is the law that gives the planter of a tree ownership. And we have given them community-based systems to also help engage timber contractors who come into the landscape to exploit these trees for timber in the future. So essentially, we have made some improvements in helping them overcome the issues about retainer. On sustainability, we have embedded a community project, which were mostly boreholes in the district assembly system. And that is a good way to ensure that they can be maintained and can be sustained to provide services to the communities. For those land-based activities, we've also connected them to the cocoa board relating to cocoa and those other commodities and food crops to the Ministry of Agriculture Extension System. But the good thing is that most of these tree crops and food crops being implemented by the CBOs and the individuals are already generating income. So they are able to use it to maintain the farms and possibly, if land is available, expand. Thank you.
Byron, tenemos otra pregunta.
Muchas gracias.
Byron, we have another question. Yes, we had another question that was also for Winston from Ghana. What's the sustainability plan that you are promoting?
Okay, so I think I answered the two questions together, and I indicated the one on sustainability that we have embedded them in the district assembly system, and also they are already generating income.
Okay. Byron, tenemos otra pregunta. ¿Puedo leer?
Byron, we have another question. Can I read it? Yeah, okay. Thank you, Winston. So we have one last question. May I read it? Yes, go ahead. Yes, I'm going to read this. It's written in English. It's for DL.
This question is for DL from DRC. Can you say more about the DGM has supported IPLC access to community forest concessions and in helping communities to derive revenue generating activities? So this question is for DL. I don't know if you want to share something, Jen, on this. Gracias, Byron.
Adelante, estimado Diel.
Go ahead, please, DL.
Well, I would begin with what? He's asking. Yes, hello.
Johnson, si puedes repetir la pregunta.
Perfecto.
Johnson, could you repeat the question?
I understood the question. Can I just answer? Yes, directly? Okay. So the question that was made to me was to know on the concession of the forests and how our Aboriginal people are having access to the revenue. Well, what I can say is that our activity is in the process of reforesting these communities. Now, if we see the article that has been issued for this gives the possibility of a community to ask for a part or all of the forest that they have acquired for their daily activities. In this context, there are concessions that can be given or asked by the community, and they have to prove that there is an opportunity. So there are concessions that are attributed and they're accompanied by a management that is set in place to allow for the members of the community to accompany other members to find what the benefits of said concession via the valorization of the product that has been given on their usage, on knowing on respect of tradition. For us,
mode de vie traditionnel et ça redore l'image des peuples autochtones en République démocratique.
On improving the image of the Aboriginal people in Congo. Why? Because before they didn't have this kind of right. So now we have the question of how, we have this question of how we're going to give them this property. So now we can show them that there is land that belongs to the Aboriginal people. So that is the first advantage we have. The second advantage is that
de développement socio-économique.
there are different excuse me. There are different activities that are carried over by the activity and that they need accompaniment by the authorities to carry them over successfully. So they have to have a framework in which now we give them the framework of saying, for example, this is our solidarity or activities we're going to have with you.
Plus de $7,000.
That will give you, for example, $7,000 and gives you the possibility to access a credit to try and practice this revenue generating activity. Other than that, we also have the activities that are linked to pisciculture and also to raising animals and also of apiculture, which are also being developed. And all of that are activities that create revenue for the communities that also contribute to also fight climate change and also that improve the lives of the Aboriginal people. So the fact that we are conserving our forests intact as much as possible also help us to find a different way of life and also to contribute to the improvement of their own lives. This is how we're doing it at the social organizational level in this regard. So we give them concession to the different forests, we give them alternate activities, we also help them develop themselves, and also we become their partners. So that is a question that is the answer that I could give you. As I was saying during my presentation, it is sometimes difficult to develop all aspects when you're trying to obtain the autonomy of these people. But the Dgm project has had a great impact in the midst of these communities who can see how they can take reins of their own future. Now, when it came to the question about, when it comes to my colleague in Ghana about the proprietorship, if we did this in my territory, or if we empowered the communities in my community, or give them a pilot program, or have them make their own decisions on their own community, that is a mechanism that of sharing and of proprietorship. And there are communities that are open to such things and to be monitored for the development of such activities. And they have taken the steps to capitalize on put these on the forefront of their activities. So there are already processes
Arriver à la durabilité
and that are being set in place to help them create as much projects as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that answer. I think we are all clear about that. Yes, it's sometimes it's complicated to go deeper and seek alternatives for the solution when we seek for autonomy. So we need to keep promoting these new alternatives, these new innovations that are being generated from the DGM Global for Indigenous Peoples and Local Communities. So now I will leave the floor to the Global Executing Agency to see if they have any closing remarks to close this very interesting event, because due to time we cannot keep discussing these activities and experiences of the project. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Byron, and today's excellent panelists, Mike, Surti, Winston, Laura, and Biel, for this incredibly informative and inspiring discussion on DGM community-led initiatives and their impact. And thank you all as well for the great questions. My name is Chloe Hans Barrientos, and I'm part of the DGM Global team at Conservation International. So we've finally come to the very exciting moment for the whole DGM program. I would like to present to you all the 2021 DGM Annual Report. This year's annual report is completely digital. It's available in English, Spanish, French, and Portuguese as 4 separate websites that you will have access to once accessing this landing page. This digital report reflects many of the extraordinary achievements that we've heard today from our friends around the world, of the many, and to be exact, over 600 community-led initiatives that DGM Indigenous peoples and local communities not only designed, but selected as initial proposals and then implemented, and in some cases even closed out for the countries that have recently closed out. And then for those that are in peak implementation are currently active on the ground. And many more to come, as our moderator Byron shared with us today, is DGM Guatemala has recently launched, and we expect the same for Nepal and Congo soon. So as you heard during the webinar, the DGM is a really unique mechanism that was not only designed by IPLCs, but is still governed and implemented by them. We hope that this report can further promote the importance of direct access to climate finance for Indigenous peoples and local communities, and the impact that this has for the climate and for our planet. With that, I just want to congratulate everyone, all the key actors that were involved in bringing this report together, from the people on the ground in the communities that shared their stories and their results, to the National Executing Agency staff, to the National Steering Committee, Global Steering Committee, and of course our team here at the Global Executing Agency. So with that, in the couple minutes that we have left, I want to turn it over to our colleague Ligiani Castro, that's going to share one of the most recent and exciting also opportunities from DGM Global.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ligiani Castro, and I'm very happy to be part now of the DGM Global agency. And I would like to promote an opportunity that we have open right now, which is the DGM Global Learning Fellowship. This opportunity, it is specifically for Indigenous people and local communities that are already involved in the DGM countries. And our goal is to really strengthen local to global storytelling, share the learning and knowledge exchange across the DGM countries, so IPLCs can learn from and potentially adapt one another's best practices in DGM project implementation into a global context. So I'm gonna drop the link so you can learn more about this opportunity. You can also follow us on our social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, to learn more about future opportunities and events that we are going to be posting there. Thank you, Chloe, and thank you, everyone.
Byron, vamos al cierre.
Muy bien, gracias. Entonces ahí queda nuevamente la invitación.
Thank you. There's the invitation to access to these fellowships that are going to be filled with learning for each of their participants. I would like to thank all of you. It was a privilege to interact with you and learning from your relevant experiences. Let's hope that we can have these more often, so we can keep working on Indigenous peoples and local communities. So thank you again for the opportunity. And now We close with this message. We need to value our land. We don't have another one. We need to value Earth. We don't have another one. So we need to appeal to national and international organizations to